And now for something completely different.
Rugby league in the NRL is one of the biggest sporting competitions in Oceania right now. The reigning champions, the Penrith Panthers, are crushing the competition, winning the grand final 3 years back to back to back. Penrith wasn't always a top dog, and back in the early 2000s, there was one team that was extremely dominant, the Melbourne Storm. The Melbourne Storm was one of the newest clubs in the competition, only joining in 1998. Yet, from 2006 to 2009, they came on the top of the ladder, winning the minor premiership 3 times, and winning the grand final 2 times. They were on top of the world, but there was just one little thing: they were cheating.
Rugby league and all Australian sport has been rocked tonight.
Storm representatives have come in and confessed to a well-organised system of paying players outside the cap.
I can't understand how they can celebrate cheating competitions, because that's what they were.
This amounted to $1.7 million over the last 5 years.
It allowed them to create a dream team, a star-studded lineup which came at a price.
The Melbourne Storm salary cap rort was revealed as being far worse than first thought.
Severely underestimated, it now amounts to a staggering $3.2 million across 5 years.
To the levels that they're talking now, it's just blown me away.
The penalty will be the stripping of 3 minor premierships and 2 premierships.
So to take premierships and minor premierships off a club, that's unknown territory in sport in Australia.
All competition points earned thus far will be taken away.
It is an unbelievable blow. It's obviously the lowest day for the club.
What we cherish most have been taken away from us by the harshest of penalties.
It's as harsh as you can get for what can only be described as cheating.
Cheat's a pretty strong word.
The scandal, unprecedented in rugby league history, shocking everyone involved with the game.
It's already been described as one of the biggest scandals in Australian sporting history.
The benchmark of the competition disgraced, their history virtually wiped out.
The Storm have been in the last 4 grand finals in a row. They've won 2 premierships. They've been the dominant team of the last 4 or 5 years, and now we know why, because they were massively rorting the salary cap in such an even competition, one where the salary cap rules are so tightly enforced, it made a massive difference.
As of this morning, the 4 independent directors have been removed.
The disclosures by the Storm's owner this morning were damning in the extreme.
From 4th place, Melbourne has tumbled to the bottom of the ladder.
Is it fraud? That's something for the police to investigate.
I believe it's a very, very sad day for the game indeed.
The Melbourne Storm were riding high in 2010, winning 4 out of 6 of their first games of the season, and just off the back of winning the entire competition in 2009. You would be a fool to bet against them. Well, on April 15th, 2009, a few bets were put on the Melbourne Storm to come dead last. Now, either these people were just pissing away their money, or they knew something that hadn't been released to the general public yet. 7 days later, the NRL announced that they had figured out that the Melbourne Storm had been intentionally breaching the salary cap for years.
Storm representatives have come in and confessed to a well-organised system of paying players outside the cap. This amounted to $1.7 million over the last 5 years, including approximately $700,000 in 2010.
In the NRL, each team gets to pay their team a maximum amount of money, limiting wealthy teams from pinching all the good players from the other teams. It came out that there was a culture of systematic salary cap breaching in the Melbourne Storm, spending millions more on players than the other teams. They had under the table paid their players more than their salaries to entice them to stay in the team, opposed to taking bigger paychecks than other teams who would have recruited them.
Investigators also found the club sent side letters to 3 of the game's best players, Greg Inglis, Cameron Smith and Billy Slater, detailing that the footballers would receive an amount far in excess of their signed contracts lodged with the National Rugby League.
Salary breaches had happened in the NRL before, such as my beloved Warriors, who didn't disclose third-party payments that were being paid to their players in the year 2000, but most notably the Bulldogs in 2002, who were found to be deliberately breaching the salary cap to create a super team who were threatening to win the 2002 minor premiership. As punishment, the Bulldogs were stripped of all their competition points for the year and were put to the bottom of the ladder.
The National Rugby League has resolved to issue the Bulldogs with a breach notice, withdrawing 37 NRL competition points from its 2002 season tally and fining the club $500,000.
Up to this point, that was the biggest salary cap scandal in Australian Rugby League history. However, the Melbourne Storm topped that, as they were not only cheating, but they hid their cheating so well, they were able to win 2 grand finals and 3 minor premierships before they were caught.
The elaborate lengths that they went to hide the payments was quite extraordinary. The breakthrough in the investigation was the discovery by the salary cap auditor and his team of a file in a separate room at the Storm to the room that contained the file with the players' contracts outlining payments to the players not declared to us.
The punishment for this was severe. The Storm was stripped of all their competition points, just like what happened to the Bulldogs in 2002. And additionally, they were barred from winning any further points for the year, meaning that they would be guaranteed to come dead last, even if they won all the rest of their games. This led to those bets for the Storm being the wooden spooners to be paid out by the betting agencies. The police looked into this to see if there was insider trading going on, but I can't find any evidence of anyone being arrested or punished for any reason. But come on, with a situation like that, it had to have been insider trading. Additionally, the Storm was stripped of their 2 premierships and their 3 minor premierships that they had won during that period. They were also forced to pay a fine and had to pay back all the prize money that they had won during that period as well. Now today and back then, there are defenders of the Storm in this scandal. The main argument is that the Storm trained all these players to be as good as they were, so why shouldn't they be able to keep them in their team?
Melbourne team did not get created by going out and buying great players from other clubs and just to run the rule over their best players. Adam Blair had his first grade debut for the Storm at age 20. Cooper Cronk had his debut in first grade for the Storm at age 20. Ryan Hoffman had his debut in rugby league in first grade for the Storm at age 19. Greg Inglis debuted in first grade for the Storm at age 18. Billy Slater debuted for the Storm in first grade at age 19. Cameron Smith debuted for the Storm in 2002 at age 19. Brett White debuted in first grade for the Storm in 2005 at age 22. Israel Folau debuted for the Storm in first grade at age 17. Dallas Johnson debuted for the Storm in first grade at age 21. They didn't go out and buy these players with deep pockets or cheating deals. They went out and bought these people as kids. They developed them. They asked them to go and live in a foreign city away from their family and friends. They went down there with the charter of an adventure to make rugby league work in Melbourne. They went down there to a media that didn't want them, to a city that didn't want them. They played on a field that wasn't the right size. They played in front of parlous crowds week after week. They walked around the streets and no one knew them and no one cheered for them. We sent them down there and Craig Bellamy and his troops built this team, and they built it to become competition champions, world champions. They became great test players and great origin players. And our game punishes the club for their success by now saying you can't come together. This team has evolved over time, and I don't care what these players earn for what they've done, because when you're the best in the world, you deserve a pay rise and you deserve to get good money. And the Melbourne Storm have got themselves in this position, and they've got the game in this position because they were great at what they did. And this is their punishment for being great.
One could argue the situation with the Bulldogs was worse in 2002, as they had specifically gone out and formed a dream team of players from other clubs. But it just isn't fair for a club to keep all the good and expensive players just because they gave them the original training. Many clubs just don't have the resources or the population in their surrounding areas to foster young players to become superstars.
It's a basic fundamental of the competition that we're trying to even talent. Not every club can develop thousands of juniors like Penrith, excuse me, or a Brisbane. Some clubs have to buy players in. That's why we have a salary cap system. This club, yes, it developed players into origin and test players, but it kept them as well. And it went to great lengths, illegal lengths, to keep those players together.
Some teams need to import their players to make them competitive, which is good because it makes the competition more competitive in the entirety of the NRL. Look at the NRL from the year 2000 to 2020. There were 12 unique winners, in a competition where the majority of the time there were 16 teams. The salary cap had kept the teams relatively equal, where any year basically any team could win, unless you're the Titans or the Warriors apparently. The Panthers have been dominant for years now. But there are definitely teams that are nipping at their tails. Ivan Cleary's Penrith Panthers are more of an exception than the rule. The Melbourne Storm was definitely wrong to do this, and frankly I don't think the punishments went far enough. The coach and the players were not punished for the intentional cheating. No one was banned. They didn't even need to give back the illegal payments that they received. People argue Coach Bellamy and the players didn't know, but come on. The few people who were getting the extra cash, they knew what they were worth. They knew what the other clubs would pay them, and they knew that they were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars on the side to convince them to stay in the team.
Any situation where you're asked to sign 2 contracts effectively must be a situation where your alarm bells are ringing.
And I'm not sure many people consider this in this situation, but junior and more inexperienced players getting to play with great players makes them better players. The fact that the Storm were allowed to keep such strong players meant that they could act as trainers and mentors for the players that are deeper in their ranks.
Remember we bought James Maloney?
Yep.
And I thought James Maloney would be great for the club and great for the group. And I actually sat down, there was Dylan Edwards, Nathan, Jerome Luai, Tyron May, I think Sean O'Sullivan, there was a few of them there. I took one and I said, look, we're going to buy James Maloney for this reason, and it's going to be to the benefit of all of you, but a couple of you are going to feel like you're being held back a little bit, and we wanted him to play with Nathan especially. And Jerome had big offers to go to other clubs because he was an outstanding junior player. But I said, stick, mate, it'll be better for you in the long term if you do.
This was an unfair advantage that the Storm had. Now we all know what happened after. The Melbourne Storm still stayed dominant in the NRL. I would argue partly because their overpaid players stayed around afterwards and took pay cuts to stay in the team. Because let's be real, they'd already got their ill-gotten payouts to stay in their team. The Storm won the 2012 NRL Grand Final just 2 years after being forced to come dead last. They also won in 2017 and 2020, being runner-ups in 2016 and 2018. You can't argue that they aren't one of the most dominant clubs the NRL has ever seen. But remember, they're still being coached by Craig Bellamy, the same club whose team cheated all those years ago. They created this winning legacy on ill-gotten foundations that has led young talent to join their ranks as they are perceived as winners. Would the Storm's current superstars like Munster and Pappenhausen have joined the team if not for the Storm's name and their legacy? There's no way to know for sure. What is known is the Storm is not sorry for them cheating. Recently, they publicly celebrated all of their finals wins, including the ones that had been stripped away from them.
Melbourne are a great club who I think are widely respected throughout the league for a lot of things they've done. They're not respected for that salary cap time, and I really can't understand why they would do that. I get the players believe they won those competitions, and they took the bumps and bruises, they did all of that, but the competitions was taken off them. And no matter which way you want to argue it, the fact is they were deemed, I guess, illegal by the NRL, and they don't count in the record book. I can't understand how they can celebrate cheating competitions, because that's what they were.
Straight away you think of the amount of work that we put into winning the grand final in 07 and 09, and even the minor premierships, that's really hard to do, to win a minor premiership over 26 weeks.
Are they still your titles? Do the boys?
Yeah, look, mate, you got different opinions, and
they're stripped away. Amongst the players, how do you?
Well, amongst the players, we still, they're ours. It's hard to then say to someone, mate, well, that's gone. We were there in ANZ Stadium in 2007. We were there in ANZ Stadium in 09. It's hard to say, mate, well, that's gone now. We still have the memories.
Still the memories.
We've all got the rings. And people, I get it. People say, mate, how can you think like that? But that's just the way it is.
The gall of the Storm, they get away with you've won grand finals, but you've lost premierships. But to actually produce, replica 2007, 2009 premierships when you got them stripped for some of the worst salary cap cheating in the game's history, this really, really did not read the room.
It just shows no remorse. That's what it shows. It shows that they obviously don't care. They've felt that way the whole way through. But it's a bit of an insult to the teams that lost the competitions against them. Do you reckon Parramatta forgive them?
See, I don't want the premiership in return, but the whole but we were the same bunch of guys. We were no one's
all
taking
the players
away.
Did the work. Wow.
Yeah. so does everybody else. But you did it with players that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't cheated the cap.
This would be like Lance Armstrong or the Russian Olympic team celebrating their ill-gotten wins. When you cheat in a competition, you have an unfair advantage over the teams who are following the rules. It is not something to be proud of to beat a team who is worse than you because they're following the rules. I don't care how much effort the players put into winning those games. They were cheating, and the fact that there is no remorse for it is incredibly gross. This is why when I'm watching the footy, I cheer for two teams, the Warriors and any team playing against the Melbourne Storm.
Edwards